It was early morning when she first appeared in the village of Umweke, walking down the road like a lost spirit, her bare feet stirring up dust in the quiet air. Her clothes, torn and dirty, clung to her frail frame, but what truly made her unsettling was the way her eyes seemed to see everything and nothing at once. A group of women who had gathered by the roadside glanced up as she passed. One of them, an elderly woman named Nina, felt a strange coldness in the air, like the wind had whispered a warning. She caught her breath and whispered to her companions, "Who is she?" The other women stared, but none could answer. The woman's face seemed familiar, yet they couldn't place her. It was as if she had stepped out of a forgotten dream, her features soft, yet haunting, like someone they should know, but had long since lost. She feels like someone we should remember," one of the women murmured, a tremor in her voice. The woman stopped, turning her gaze towards them. Her eyes seemed to lock onto each one in turn, as though studying them with an intensity that made their hearts skip. I don't know where I am," she said, her voice carrying a strange weight. The moment she spoke, an awe settled over the group. It wasn't just the words, but the way she said them. It was as if the sound of her voice twisted the air around them, filling their lungs with something unspoken. Something heavy. Nina, who had always prided herself on her sharp instincts, felt the chill deepen in her bones. Something about the way the woman spoke, her voice, the way it echoed faintly, like a forgotten memory, left an unsettling taste in her mouth. "Do you know your name?" Nina asked, her voice tentative. The woman's lips parted as though to speak, but her gaze shifted to the ground, and she whispered, I cannot remember." The silence that followed felt thick, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The other women exchanged wary glances. Something was wrong. They led her to the village center, where a fire still burned from the night before. People gathered around, drawn by the unusual visitor. The villagers murmured amongst themselves, speculating about the stranger, but none could say who she was. They had never seen her before, and yet, there was something undeniably familiar about her. I am not from here," the woman said again, her voice trembling slightly. The same strange air lingered around her words, making the villagers uneasy. "Who are you?" a man named Ojoku asked, stepping forward. He had been the first to notice the oddness in her presence. "What is your name?" The woman hesitated. Her brow furrowed, as if she were searching for the right words, or perhaps searching for something lost. I can't remember." Her voice slipped like a ghost through the air, and as it did, the villagers felt it, a strange shift, like the world itself was tilting, ever so slightly. Their hearts raced, and for a moment, each person felt as if they were standing on the edge of a dream they couldn't wake from. Then, the old man, Iziogo, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he took in the woman's face. "You," he rasped, his voice cracking with age and disbelief. "I know you." The woman's head snapped up at the mention of those words, her eyes widening with fear. "No, I don't think you do." But the elder, his voice laced with conviction, shook his head. "No, you are Adan. I remember you." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The name carried a weight, an echo. They all seemed to recognize it, but none could place why. Adan. The name clung to the air like a forgotten memory. It was as if every villager had heard it before, in a half-remembered dream or a whisper in the wind. And yet, no one knew who Adan was. Iziogo, shaking with age and emotion, pressed a hand to his heart. "You were the daughter of Okoro, the hunter. You disappeared 20 years ago. You vanished without a trace, and now, you are here." Adan's face tightened, a flicker of recognition crossing her expression. But it was fleeting, like a shadow in the dark, and quickly replaced by confusion. I don't understand," she whispered. Nina, sensing the tension rising, moved closer to her, placing a hand gently on her arm. "Adan, where have you been? What happened to you?" Adan looked at Nina, her eyes clouded with a distant sorrow. I don't know. I remember. A forest. A thick, dark forest where the trees whispered my name. The villagers fell silent. There is a forest, Nina said, her voice trembling with recognition. The forest of forgotten names. No one who enters it ever comes out the same. Adan's lips trembled. I was there. The air in the village seemed to grow colder, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The whispers among the crowd grew louder, and Nina stepped back. The elder, Iziogo, gripped his staff tightly, his knuckles turning white. Do you remember the bargain you made? He asked, his voice a mixture of fear and reverence. Adan looked at him, her eyes wide with confusion. Bargain? The villagers held their breath as Iziogo continued. When you disappeared, it was not by accident. You made a deal. You went into that forest, and you made a sacrifice. The memory hit her like a sudden storm. She could see it now, the forest, a dark labyrinth of twisted trees, their branches gnawed like the hands of ancient spirits. The air had been thick with a kind of magic, a pull, as if the trees themselves had beckoned her closer. And she had gone willingly, drawn by a strange force she couldn't explain. She remembered standing before a massive tree, its bark dark and smooth, covered in names she didn't recognize. And in the shadows, something had whispered her name. Adan. It was a voice that she knew but didn't. A voice that had come from the very heart of the forest. And then, the bargain. She had given something in exchange. Something precious. Something she hadn't realized she could lose. The price had been steep, and it was only now, standing in the village, that she began to understand what had truly been taken from her. I gave up my name, she whispered. Nina's face fell. You gave up more than that, Adan. The forest doesn't let go of what it takes. The truth unfolded like a terrible flower, its petals dark and poisonous. Adan hadn't just disappeared that night, she had become part of the forest. Her name had been stolen, lost to the trees, and in exchange, the forest had allowed her to live, to return to the world she once knew. But the price of that bargain was greater than she could have ever imagined. The woman who had come back was not the same as the one who had entered. She was a ghost, a shadow of the person she used to be. And as long as the forest had her name, she could never truly be whole. I was forgotten, she whispered, her eyes filled with sorrow. But now, I remember everything. I remember what I did. As Adan stood before the villagers, the air grew thick again, swirling around them like an invisible storm. Her eyes, once distant, were now filled with a terrible understanding. She had come back to pay the price, to reclaim what was lost. But the forest had other plans. As her name slipped from her lips again, the wind howled, and the shadows of the forest seemed to stretch toward her, calling her back to the place she had once left. And just before the villagers could reach her, before they could even speak her name, she disappeared into the air, a wisp, a shadow, lost once more. But this time, the forest had remembered her. And in the silence that followed, the villagers could still hear her voice, echoing faintly in the distance, calling, but never to be found again.